Emily had just moved into the neighborhood with her small collection of boxes and a heart full of hope. She was eager to start fresh, and she loved the idea of morning walks along quiet streets and afternoons reading under the shade of trees. But on the first evening, as she stepped onto her porch to take in the cool air, she heard a low bark that grew louder. When she turned her head, she saw a large German shepherd standing stiff and watchful behind the neighbor's fence, its dark coat gleaming under the porch lights, and its eyes locked on her every move. It barked once more, deep and sharp, and she froze, unsure whether to wave or retreat. The next morning she was greeted by an elderly woman from across the street who gave her a kind smile before leaning closer to whisper that she should stay away from that dog. Apparently the German shepherd was known for being dangerous, unpredictable, and impossible to trust. Emily thanked the woman, but something in her tone felt rehearsed, as if it was a warning passed along like a neighborhood tale rather than first-hand experience. Still she kept her distance, watching from across the yard. Whenever the dog appeared, its bark would echo through the quiet street, and she would hear doors shut quickly and blinds draw closed. But she noticed something others seemed to ignore. Behind the bark there was a deep sadness in the dog's eyes, a look she could not shake from her mind. In the following days, she learned from another neighbor that the dog's name was Rex, and that his owner, Mr. Carter, rarely had visitors. Apparently, the dog had been through multiple homes before this one and had once been mistreated, which was why he guarded so fiercely. The neighbors avoided Rex crossing the street whenever they walked past and keeping their children from playing near that yard. Emily, however, could not ignore the way Rex's ears perked up whenever she spoke softly from her porch, as if he was curious, but unsure. She felt an ache in her chest, thinking of how lonely he must feel behind that tall wooden fence, barking at a world that feared him. Emily began sitting outside in the evenings just to observe and speak quietly to Rex. She would say hello or comment about the weather, her voice soft and calm, hoping he would sense she meant no harm. The first few nights Rex only stared, never moving closer, his eyes sharp and untrusting. But as the days passed, his posture softened slightly. He would tilt his head when she spoke, and sometimes stop barking sooner than usual. There was no dramatic change yet, but Emily felt something shift. It was small and fragile, like the first crack of sunlight after a long storm, and she knew she could not simply walk away from this strange new connection, because in her heart she believed that the dangerous dog next door was not dangerous at all, but simply waiting for someone willing to see the soul behind the bark. Emily woke up one morning with the sound of barking echoing across the neighborhood, but this time it felt different, less of a warning and more of a call for attention. She stepped onto her porch holding a cup of coffee and looked toward the neighbor's fence, where Rex paced back and forth, his tail stiff and his ears high alert. The old boards of the fence rattled slightly under his weight, and she wondered what had caused him to be so restless that early in the day Mr. Carter was nowhere in sight, and the yard seemed empty except for the large dog, who stopped pacing as soon as he spotted her. His eyes met hers for a brief second, and there was no malice in them, only something she could not quite name, maybe confusion or maybe longing. The neighbors had told her stories about Rex being dangerous, about him lunging at people and snarling at delivery drivers, but one afternoon she decided to ask a delivery driver directly what the dog had done. The man smiled and shrugged, saying he had been delivering packages for years, and yes, Rex barked like a storm, but had never actually bitten anyone, not even come close. Emily thanked him and felt a small spark of relief. Maybe the warnings she had been given were exaggerations rooted in fear or gossip that had spread for too long. She thought about how people often judged others based on old stories, never giving them a chance to prove they could be different, and as she thought of Rex standing alone in that yard, she knew she could not ignore him. She began sitting on the porch more often, and every time she did she spoke softly to Rex, sometimes just greeting him with a hello or telling him about her day at work, her voice steady and gentle. She avoided making sudden movements or getting too close. At first Rex would only stare, sometimes pacing, sometimes lying down with his head resting on his paws, but always keeping an eye on her. Then after several days he began responding. His ears would perk up when she spoke, his head would tilt slightly, and on one occasion he even wagged his tail just once, but it was enough to make her heart swell. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emily noticed Rex's water bowl had tipped over and the ground around it was dry. She hesitated, hearing the voices of her neighbors warning her about the dog, but something inside urged her to help. She filled a bucket with water and gently slid it through a small gap at the base of the fence. Rex backed up, at first cautious and unsure, but then he sniffed the water and began drinking. When he was done he looked at her, and for a brief moment his tail wagged slowly as if to say thank you. Emily smiled and whispered, "Good boy," feeling that tiny fragile connection grow stronger over the next few weeks. Emily learned more about Rex from Mr. Carter himself, an older man who lived alone and who admitted Rex had belonged to his late son. After his son passed away, Rex had become overly protective and hard to handle, but Mr. Carter had kept him out of loyalty and love. Emily listened as he shared how the dog had been mistreated before his son adopted him, which explained his distrust of strangers. She realized then that Rex was not dangerous, he was grieving and guarding the only family he had left. She looked at him standing tall by the fence and knew in her heart she had made the right choice to trust her instincts rather than the fearful whispers of others. One late afternoon, Emily returned from work to find the street quiet and still except for the sound of Rex barking, but it was not the usual bark filled with warning. It was high-pitched and frantic, almost like he was calling for help. She set her bag down on the porch and hurried over to the fence. Looking through the wooden gaps, she saw Rex pacing in circles, his tongue out and his water bowl completely flipped over. Again, the yard was dry and there was no sign of Mr. Carter. Emily hesitated as the warnings from the neighbors echoed in her mind, but then she saw Rex stop and stare at her, his ears low and his body stiff yet not aggressive. It was more like he was waiting for her to do something. Emily went inside, filled a metal bucket with fresh water and carried it back to the fence. She knelt down slowly and spoke softly to Rex, telling him it was okay, she was only here to help. He sniffed the air through the gap and backed up, giving her room to slide the bucket into the yard. For a moment he did nothing, then stepped closer and drank deeply. His tail twitched slightly like he wanted to wag, but was not sure if it was safe. When he finished, he looked up at her and held her gaze longer than usual. Emily felt a warmth rise in her chest. She whispered, "Good boy," and stood there watching him sit down calmly for the first time instead of pacing, as if her small gesture had eased his mind. Over the next few days she made it a habit to check on him, especially when Mr. Carter was away. Sometimes she tossed a soft tennis ball over the fence just to see what would happen, and to her surprise Rex chased it each time, bringing it back and placing it near the fence as if inviting her to toss it again. Slowly and carefully the walls between them began to break down. One evening Mr. Carter came outside and noticed the exchange. He watched silently for a moment, then walked over, smiling faintly. He told her that Rex had not played like that with anyone since his son had passed away. Emily listened quietly and then told him she thought Rex was misunderstood and just needed someone to show him patience. Mr. Carter nodded and said he had been worried he could no longer handle the dog, but seeing them interact gave him hope. The neighborhood soon began to notice that Rex no longer barked wildly whenever Emily came near. In fact, he started to greet her with a single short bark and a tail wag whenever she stepped onto her porch. This change made some people curious and even a little confused. One neighbor commented that maybe the dog was only dangerous to people who treated him like a threat. Emily kept her thoughts to herself, but deep down she believed it was true. She had never felt fear when looking at Rex, only sadness and an urge to connect. One Saturday morning as Emily sat outside sipping her coffee, Rex walked right up to the fence and rested his head between the slats, staring at her with soft brown eyes. She reached out slowly, not touching him yet, but letting him sniff her hand from a safe distance. His nose twitched and his body relaxed slightly. It was the closest they had ever been, and she felt an overwhelming sense that she had done the right thing by following her heart instead of the fearful warnings of others. Weeks passed and the bond between Emily and Rex grew stronger. Every day she spent more time outside, sitting by the fence talking to him while he lay quietly on the other side. Sometimes she would read aloud from a book and Rex would sit there listening with his head tilted slightly as though he understood every word. Mr. Carter noticed the change too, and one evening he came over leaning on the fence with a tired smile. He told Emily how surprised he was because Rex had never taken to anyone this quickly, not even other family members, after his son had passed away. Emily listened closely as he shared more about the dog's past. Rex had belonged to Mr. Carter's son, who had adopted him from a shelter years ago when Rex was still a young pup. Before that, Rex had been shuffled between owners who had treated him harshly and left him wary of people. After the death of Mr. Carter's son, the dog had grown increasingly protective and suspicious, barking at anyone who came near. Even delivery drivers or children passing by. Mr. Carter admitted he had considered rehoming him more than once because of the complaints from neighbors, but he could not bring himself to let Rex go, as he felt it would be like losing the last piece of his son. Emily could see the weight of grief in his eyes, and she understood why Rex behaved the way he did. He was not dangerous, he was guarding his only family and carrying his own pain. Emily began helping with small things like checking on Rex when Mr. Carter was busy or away. She would refill his water bowl or toss him a ball just to keep him active and engaged. Slowly Rex started responding to her in ways that surprised everyone in the neighborhood. He stopped barking aggressively when she came near and sometimes even wagged his tail when she called his name. The neighbors who once warned her to stay away now watched in curiosity, whispering among themselves as they saw Rex sitting calmly near the fence whenever Emily was around. One afternoon, Emily decided to take things a step further. She asked Mr. Carter if she could try petting Rex from the safe side of the fence. He hesitated, but eventually agreed, telling her to move slowly and stop if Rex showed any sign of fear or aggression. Emily knelt by the fence holding out her hand and speaking softly. Rex approached, cautiously sniffing her fingers through the gap. For a long moment neither of them moved, then Rex licked her hand once and sat down. Emily felt a lump in her throat and smiled, whispering, "Good boy." Mr. Carter watched from the porch and shook his head in disbelief, saying he had never seen Rex trust someone so quickly. From then on their connection deepened. Each day Rex would wait near the fence in the evenings, watching for Emily to come outside, and sometimes he would bring over one of his toys, laying it near the gap as if offering her a gift. Emily began researching dog behavior, learning more about how to build trust with a protective breed like a German Shepherd. She understood his body language better each day and learned how to move slowly, speak calmly, and respect his space, and the more she respected him the more he opened up to her. It became clear to everyone that Rex was not the dangerous dog they believed him to be. He was a loyal and intelligent companion who had simply been misunderstood. Emily felt proud that she had trusted her heart and ignored the fearful whispers, because in doing so she had not only changed Rex's life, but also helped Mr. Carter see that his beloved dog still had so much love to give. The night of the storm arrived without warning. Dark clouds rolled over the neighborhood and heavy rain began to fall, followed by loud cracks of thunder. Emily sat inside reading, but her focus broke when she heard Rex barking loudly outside. His bark was different than usual, deeper and more urgent, like an alarm. She grabbed her raincoat and stepped out onto the porch. The wind howled and the rain stung her face. As she looked toward the fence she saw Rex pacing and barking at something beyond the street. Suddenly she noticed her gate swinging open. The storm had ripped it loose from the latch, and in the shadowy street she caught sight of movement, something low to the ground slinking closer. She realized it was a coyote, likely searching for food. Driven into the neighborhood by the storm, Rex growled, his fur bristling as the coyote froze and then bared its teeth. Emily's heart raced. She had never seen a coyote up close before, and the idea of it coming near her yard made her step back instinctively. Before she could process what to do, Rex leapt over his own fence, landing with a heavy thud between her and the coyote. He barked fiercely, his posture rigid and protective. The coyote hesitated, clearly intimidated, but it still edged forward, snarling. Then Rex lunged, not to bite, but to chase and intimidate. His powerful presence was enough to send the wild animal fleeing into the stormy night. Emily stood frozen, watching the dog, who had once been called dangerous, now standing guard over her as if she were part of his pack. Rex turned to her, his ears slightly back and his eyes soft as though asking if she was safe. She knelt down despite the pouring rain, whispering, "Thank you," her voice barely audible over the storm. Rex wagged his tail once and shook the water from his coat. By the time Mr. Carter arrived home later that night, Emily told him everything. He stared at Rex with a mix of pride and disbelief, and then looked at her, saying it seemed Rex had chosen to trust her completely. From that day forward the way she saw him changed, and so did the way the neighborhood looked at him. Stories of the so-called dangerous dog protecting Emily spread quickly. People who once crossed the street to avoid his yard now stopped to watch as he calmly sat near the fence. When Emily passed by, it was like the entire image of Rex had been rewritten, not by words but by his own actions. In the days following the storm, Emily and Rex became inseparable. He would wait by the fence every morning and evening, wagging his tail whenever he saw her. She would kneel by the gap, scratching gently behind his ears, and he would lean against the boards in response. Mr. Carter often smiled watching them, saying he had not seen Rex this happy since his son had been alive. Emily felt honored knowing the dog had chosen to trust her in such a powerful way. It made her think about how often people judged what they did not understand, and how sometimes one act of kindness could erase years of fear and doubt. That storm had shown Emily something deeper too. It was no longer just about a misunderstood dog, it was about loyalty, protection, and trust. She realized she had gained not just a neighbor's dog as a friend, but also a sense of belonging and purpose she could never have expected when she first moved to that street. After the storm, something between Emily and Rex shifted in a way that even Mr. Carter noticed. The dog, who once barked at every passing person, now greeted Emily with a wagging tail and soft eyes. He had gone from watching her with suspicion to waiting for her every morning at the fence, sitting patiently as if to say he trusted her presence completely. Emily too felt the change deeply. She had started as a curious neighbor, unsure of whether to approach him, and now she could not imagine a day without saying hello or spending time near him. Mr. Carter thanked Emily more than once, telling her how grateful he was that she had taken the time to show patience with Rex. He admitted he had thought about rehoming the dog because of how protective and unpredictable he had been, but now things were different. Rex seemed calmer around people when Emily was nearby, and that shift gave Mr. Carter hope. He even invited her inside one weekend to spend time with Rex up close. For the first time she entered cautiously, knowing how German Shepherds could be protective in new environments, but Rex surprised her. Instead of barking, he walked straight up to her, sniffed her hand, and rested his head against her knee as if welcoming her formally into His circle of trust from then on Emily became part of Rex's daily life. She helped feed him when Mr. Carter was out. She took him for short walks when he needed extra exercise, and she even learned basic training commands to help keep him focused. Neighbors who had once whispered warnings now stood at a distance in awe, seeing the supposedly dangerous dog calmly walking by Emily's side. Children who had been told to avoid him waved from across the street, and Rex even wagged his tail at them. His entire reputation was changing, all because someone had chosen to look past the fear and see his heart. Emily also noticed how the time spent with Rex changed her too. She had moved into the neighborhood seeking a quiet fresh start, but she had not expected to build such a bond or feel such purpose in helping an animal heal. It made her think about how many people and animals were misunderstood simply because no one took the time to understand their story. Rex had been labeled dangerous, but in truth he was loyal, brave, and full of love. When given the chance to show it one evening, Emily sat with Mr. Carter on his porch while Rex lay at her feet peacefully chewing a toy. Mr. Carter spoke softly about his late son, about how the dog had been his pride and joy, and how hard it had been to watch Rex struggle after losing him. He thanked Emily again, saying she had not just helped Rex, but had also helped him heal in ways he had not expected. Emily felt humbled. She had simply followed her instincts and chosen kindness, yet it had rippled into something far bigger. By the time summer rolled around, Rex had become a familiar, friendly face in the neighborhood. People still respected his size and strength, but they no longer saw him as a threat. Emily smiled each time she saw him greet people with a wag instead of a warning bark, and she realized the journey was never really about taming a dangerous dog. It was about breaking down walls of fear and replacing them with trust, loyalty, and love, something she would carry with her always as a lesson in never judging too quickly and always following what the heart knows to be true. After the storm, something between Emily and Rex shifted in a way that even Mr. Carter noticed. The dog, who once barked at every passing person, now greeted Emily with a wagging tail and soft eyes. He had gone from watching her with suspicion to waiting for her every morning at the fence, sitting patiently as if to say he trusted her presence completely. Emily too felt the change deeply. She had started as a curious neighbor, unsure of whether to approach him, and now she could not imagine a day without saying hello or spending time near him. Mr. Carter thanked Emily more than once, telling her how grateful he was that she had taken the time to show patience with Rex. He admitted he had thought about rehoming the dog because of how protective and unpredictable he had been, but now things were different. Rex seemed calmer around people when Emily was nearby, and that shift gave Mr. Carter hope. He even invited her inside one weekend to spend time with Rex up close. For the first time she entered cautiously, knowing how German Shepherds could be protective in new environments, but Rex surprised her. Instead of barking, he walked straight up to her, sniffed her hand, and rested his head against her knee as if welcoming her formally into his circle of trust. From then on, Emily became part of Rex's daily life. She helped feed him when Mr. Carter was out. She took him for short walks when he needed extra exercise, and she even learned basic training commands to help keep him focused. Neighbors who had once whispered warnings now stood at a distance in awe, seeing the supposedly dangerous dog calmly walking by Emily's side. Children who had been told to avoid him waved from across the street, and Rex even wagged his tail at them. His entire reputation was changing, all because someone had chosen to look past the fear and see his heart. Emily also noticed how the time spent with Rex changed her too. She had moved into the neighborhood seeking a quiet fresh start, but she had not expected to build such a bond or feel such purpose in helping an animal heal. It made her think about how many people and animals were misunderstood simply because no one took the time to understand their story. Rex had been labeled dangerous, but in truth he was loyal, brave, and full of love. When given the chance to show it one evening, Emily sat with Mr. Carter on his porch while Rex lay at her feet peacefully chewing a toy. Mr. Carter spoke softly about his late son, about how the dog had been his pride and joy, and how hard it had been to watch Rex struggle after losing him. He thanked Emily again, saying she had not just helped Rex, but had also helped him heal in ways he had not expected. Emily felt humbled. She had simply followed her instincts and chosen kindness, yet it had rippled into something far bigger. By the time summer rolled around, Rex had become a familiar, friendly face in the neighborhood. People still respected his size and strength, but they no longer saw him as a threat. Emily smiled each time she saw him greet people with a wag instead of a warning bark, and she realized the journey was never really about taming a dangerous dog. It was about breaking down walls of fear and replacing them with trust, loyalty, and love, something she would carry with her always as a lesson in never judging too quickly and always following what the heart knows to be true.